Welcome back to the theater of war, where the 64 squares from the FIDE World Cup are stained with tension and sacrifice. In round 2 game 2, we witnessed a clash that started as a solid strategic exchange but ended in an absolute devastating king hunt. On one side, the seasoned grandmaster from Russia, Evgeniy Najer, bringing his vast experience to bear, and on the other, the tenacious Madagascar international master, Fy Antenaina. For 34 moves, the fight was balanced, pieces traded, a castle went long, and the position was a tightrope walk. The pressure mounted. White's position became an unstoppable juggernaut, culminating in a queen-rook pawn assault on the black king. If you want to see more knockout chess analysis from the World Cup, do us a favor, smash that like button, drop a comment below with your favorite move of this game, and subscribe to Chessbox Worldwide so you don't miss a single knockout blow. And in the white pieces, the seasoned Russian grandmaster Evgeniy Najer opened the game with 1 e4, and the tenacious Madagascar international master Fy Antenaina, all the way from Madagascar, played e5, knight f3, knight f6, introducing us the Petrov Defense. We see d4, knight takes e4, and we see bishop d3 hitting on knight instantly. d5, knight takes e5, Fy played knight d7, and in this position the grandmaster played short castling. But however, knight takes d7 is the best move in the position, followed by bishop takes d7 and short castling. But however, after bishop d7, he played short castling, and Fy went on and played knight takes e5, d takes e5, bishop e6. In this position, bishop takes e4 should have been considered from the grandmaster, but he played knight c3. For example, after bishop e4, you could have seen pawn takes e4 and knight c3, hitting on the pawn which is on e4 with a promising position. But however, after bishop e6, the grandmaster still wanted the queens to stay on the board. So he went on and played knight c3. Fy went and played knight takes c3, pawn takes c3. The grandmaster has shattered pawns. Now he has gotten an opportunity to have these open files where he can put his rooks. Bishop c5, king h1, prophylactic move, moving away from that bishop battery, and he's hoping to go ahead and push the pawn on f4 in the future. Queen d7, planning to either go for short castling or long castling depending on the situation. Rook b1, putting an eye on the b7 square, long castling from Fy. Bishop g5, prompting Fy to go ahead and play f6, of which Fy declined and played rook e8, queen d2, supporting the bishop, bishop b6, cementing the bishop so as now to launch a thunderous attack on the king side. f4 should have been considered. For example, after f4, could have seen bishop f5, then rook comes into e1 with a promising position to play. But however, after bishop b6, he played bishop e3, requesting for an exchange, bishop f5, also requesting for an exchange, bishop takes b6, a takes b6, after queen f4, hitting on the bishop, bishop takes d3, c takes d3. The pawn structure has now been corrected. f6 from Fy, d4 from the grandmaster, rook comes to f8, queen comes to e3, moving away from the pin of the rook, pawn takes e5, pawn takes e5, and we see rook f5, hitting on the pawn which is on e5, and the grandmaster played f4. In this position, he went and played g5. And you can't take the pawn on d5 because in case of pawn takes d5, we could see rook takes pawn, and after queen d3, rook takes g5, rook f8, rook goes back to e8. This gives black a slight advantage in the position. That's why after g5, the Russian grandmaster played rook e1, pawn takes d4, rook takes f4, and rook takes f4. In this position, if you take the pawn with the rook, then the queen will take the two rooks. That's why Fy played rook takes f4 and queen takes f4, and in this position, Fy went and played queen e6, stopping any further advancements of the pawn, h3, opening a window for the king, rook comes to e7, queen g5, b5, stopping any further advancements of the pawn, queen comes into h4, king d7, queen comes to d4. Now they're maneuvering their pieces so that they can dominate the position. King comes to c8, and now he played queen b4, attacking the pawn which is on b5, c6 defending the pawn, f4, and after pawn takes f4, queen takes f4, white has got an opportunity to infiltrate his queen into the black camp. Queen f5, threatening to take the pawn which is on e5. Queen a8 check, and he played king c7 defending the pawn, queen f5 check, king c8, queen b6. He's planning to give up the pawn so that he can bring his rook on a1 and threaten all the nasty checks on the black king. Rook takes e5, the grandmaster played rook a1. Now rook a8 is a very powerful move. In this position, Fy went and played king d7, but however, queen f6 should have been considered. For example, after queen f6, we could have seen rook a8 check, king comes to d7, queen takes b7 check, king d6. queen b8 check, king goes to e6, queen goes to j8 check, king d6, queen b8 check, queen e6, and this would guarantee a minimum of a draw. But however, after rook a1, he played king d7, moving the king first from harm's way. Queen takes b7, king d6, queen check, king e6, and in this position, the grandmaster went on and played queen c7. But however, king g1 should have been considered, and followed by queen f7, and in case of queen a8, king d6, queen b8, queen c7, queen b4 check, king e6, queen g4, queen d6, and queen f4, pinning the rook, and instantly also planning to bring the rook on e1 with the furthermore dominating position. But however, after king e6, he played queen c7, attacking the pawn on c6 instantly. And now we see king f6, queen takes c6 check, queen e6, rook f1 check, and it was in this position. King g6 should have been considered. For example, king g6, and in case of queen c7, h5, king goes to g1, king h6, king h2, rook would come to e4, rook f3 defending the pawn, then queen e5 check, and after queen takes, rook d3, h4, fixing the pawns, and this would be a furthermore playable position and a fighting one from f5. But however, after rook f1, he played rook f5. In this position, you see the grandmaster had 3 pawns and fi has 2 pawns, and it means this is a lost endgame for fi. So the grandmaster instantly went and played rook takes f5, king takes f5, and after g4 hitting on the king, king goes back to f6, queen takes e6, king takes e6, and after king g2, you see that now the king is going to be coming in. Even if fi goes ahead and plays his king on e5, all the squares are here and he can't get away with infiltrating into. Remember also he has 1 pawn, he has 2 pawns, and this would be winning for the Russian grandmaster. And it was in this position, after move 44, that Fy Antenaina, the champion international master from Madagascar, resigned. Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in your games.